It's time for our interview now. We have Rob Stanton. He's a mortgage broker, and he's going to tell us what to do, and what's happening in the mortgage space, interest rate space here in Australia. Before we talk to him about it, though, I have to introduce him because he's my good friend and he is an excellent runner. I was just learning. Is that right, Rob?
In relative terms.
Look, relative terms.
Relative to all of us, definitely excellent runner.
Yes, from what I'm hearing here, you're some elite athlete there. But let me just tell you, Rob, because I inscribed myself, I registered myself for, or I'm planning to a Sydney half marathon in May. So I know who I'm going to be calling for some tips. It's got to be my
That's
first
a bit
one.
further than I like to run these days.
Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself. So what is it that you do, and what's going on in the mortgage world at the moment here in Australia?
Yeah, so I'm a mortgage broker. I help people get loans so they can buy houses. And the mortgage market at the moment, as I'm sure everyone's seen on the news and and everywhere, is a bit crazy because the housing prices are really high and it's kind of hard to get into the market. So I enjoy my job because I get to help people who otherwise probably would struggle to navigate the system, achieve property ownership.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that system here, because a lot of people may think, hey, why do I need a mortgage broker? There's so many websites this day and age. I can go just to check in a couple of banks or some aggregators and just apply there. Why would I need it? What are some of the hidden challenges there that people often don't consider when they are applying for a mortgage?
Yeah, when you apply directly with a bank, you're talking to one bank with one set of rules. And that's very restrictive. I have clients who say, I went to my bank and they said I can borrow $300,000. How can that be? And I look at their info and I say, well, that's because this bank is not treating your income like these banks, and you can actually borrow $600,000 if we go to the right bank for your circumstances. So mortgage brokers have traditionally 40-odd lenders. I've got 40 lenders on my panel, which each have different strengths and each fit different scenarios.
Okay, so so each bank has a very unique system and ways of looking at your income and terms and conditions that it can offer. Can you tell us a little bit about what's the variation from bank to bank? What is different? It's not just like getting some money, repaying it with a certain interest rates. What are the variable things that some bank offers that other don't?
Yeah, so in terms of income, that's a big thing. Some will take your casual income at 100%, others will take it at 80%, others won't touch it at all. There's also expenses. Some will assume that you're spending double what other banks assume, given your circumstances. So there's some of the things that impact, how much you can borrow. In terms of interest rates, each bank has their own interest rates. Another great reason to use a broker is that we can get the best rate from one of 40 lenders, not just the best rate that bank you walk into is going to offer you. And on the flip side, when you've got that loan, the bank just take you for granted. Of course, they lock you in and hope that you never leave. We can keep reviewing it and say, well, actually, they need to offer you this, or we'll go somewhere else in 2 years' time.
That's very interesting, Rob. It looks like it's a lot of work here that you're trying to help your clients to save some money here. So, Rob, can you tell me a little bit about what has been happening in interest rates? If you give us maybe a small little history from what you have seen in your career as a mortgage broker, because I remember some people saying, hey, 3% a year, interest rates was for mortgages not too long ago, and now it went up to 7-8% and then came down again. So can you give us a little bit of what happened in that roller coaster of interest rates and what is likely to happen in the future?
Yeah, we certainly went through a roller coaster during and post COVID. So interest rates were down around 2%. The really good rates in 2021, I think that was the absolute peak. or as in the trough, I suppose, if you're talking about interest rates, peak lending.
Yeah.
And then of course, that was unsustainable because it's based on the cash rate, so the rate that the banks borrow from the government essentially at, and that was at zero, close enough to zero. They were getting free money, and then they were charging 2% to you and I. At the moment, that's 3.6%, the bank's cost of lending, and they're charging a really good rate is about 5.3. So the reason that the RBA, who control that rate that the banks get their money at, the reason they lower or raise rate, the main reason is inflation. So cost of living. You go to Coles and you buy that milk and it's $2 today and it's $2.50 tomorrow because of inflation. So they're saying, oh, that's going up too fast. We need to put interest rates up because that'll stop everyone spending their money. And that's what they did, because obviously post-COVID there was a lot of cash floating around. A lot of people got cash handouts and things like that, and people were spending on whatever. There was a lot of internet buys during those lockdowns and things like that. So they said, well, we need to put rates up pretty quick. They did so, and then they were probably too high. People weren't spending enough money. The economy was kind of going down too fast. And now we've got to a point where they've cut rates a few times, and they're kind of sitting. They're sitting and watching, because inflation's not quite where they want it to be, but the economy is also not strong enough for them to put rates up yet.
Oh, I see. So you mentioned that 5.3% is a really good rate today. So let's say that our listener is currently paying, let's say 1 percentage point more than that, 6.3%. What can they do about it?
Well, they can ask their lender for a better rate. That's a nice, easy question to ask. Obviously, if they're paying 6.3%, that's a lot over what they should be paying. So there's either going to be a difficult circumstance there, like they're self-employed, they don't have tax returns, things like that, or they're getting ripped off. But yeah, they can speak to a mortgage broker rather than just putting all their eggs in one basket with one bank. They can talk to a broker. There's brokers all over the country, and just say, hey, this interest rate seems high. Here's my circumstances. What do you think I can achieve?
Interesting. And what about some banks, they offer variable rates versus fixed rates. What is what, and which one should we choose?
Yeah, very interesting, and really connects to the interest rate discussion we had a moment ago. So the fixed rates are fully based on predictions that the banks make about where the interest rates are going to go. So fixed rates 4 months ago were in the fours, like 4.8 was a pretty good fixed rate, because all the banks thought, okay, interest rates are going to keep going down. Mm-hmm. Now fixed rates are pushing above the variable rate. A lot of banks are around 5.5 because they're saying, well, we think the next interest rate move might be up. So if you fix right now, that you fix for 2 years, you've got that rate locked in for 2 years. If you're variable and the RBA puts rates up, the banks will follow, and you'll pay a higher rate than you currently do. That's the difference is security. But at the moment, I think variable rates are pretty well lower than fixed rates for most banks, and I don't see a lot of value in that, because I think the RBA will hold. I don't think they'll increase rates at all this year. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't pay more now.
Yeah, and we know that this is actually, there's always a tension. We have seen some tension here between the prime minister, the federal government, and the RBA in terms of saying, hey, why don't you lower down, because, particularly the treasurer, why don't you lower down these interest rates? But same thing in the United States. President Donald Trump, is complaining that the Fed chairman is keeping the rates for too high for too long. But at the same time, the central banks are pushing back and saying, hey, look, I know that it's going to be great for you to put the rates down because people will feel richer. But at the same time, that can get some really big unintended consequences here in the form of, inflation for everyone.
Inflation, exactly. On inflation, though, I like to look at inflation with rose-tinted glasses sometimes as a mortgage broker. The added benefit of inflation is that you've got $1 million loan now. In 15 to 20 years, that $1 million feels like 500,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that as an asset owner, inflation has a silver lining.
Yeah.
So long as wages are growing as well as expenses.
Yeah. So long as wages continue to grow at their traditional rates, which are fairly on par with inflation, and I look at it like, hey, if you're a renter, your rent has doubled in that time, and your money's worth half. But if you had a mortgage, your repayments are still the same, and your house has doubled in price. So that's the rent versus buy discussion. I just think all the metrics point to, if you can get into a property, the security of that is going to hold you well.
Yes, absolutely. And Rob, what do you say is like, for a person that is starting to plan, they are starting to think about buying a house, they're starting to save up some money. What are some of the practical things that they can do, let's say, maybe 6 months prior to applying for a home loan? Is there any homework that they can do to get the best possible outcomes later on?
I think so. I mean, the number one thing is save. That deposit's important. There's no getting around that these days. 5% is all they need, plus stamp duty if they're over the thresholds, which is a whole other discussion. But you've got to save that money. And other than that, probably, I know this sounds self-serving, but probably talk to a mortgage broker, because there's more than I can say in 30 seconds. It's really kind of getting all your ducks in a row and knowing what they are. And I speak to first home buyers every day, and they start with zero idea, and 15 minutes later they know exactly what they need to do. So that's not self-seeking. It doesn't have to be me. It can be any broker, but yeah.
Absolutely. And look, how much would a typical mortgage broker charge you? Is that a fee for service that you're paying? How does it work?
Yes, some brokers charge fees. A lot don't. I don't charge fees, and I'd say the majority don't. If we write a loan for you, we'll get paid by the bank, a commission. So it's zero out of pocket for the customer.
Which helps a lot, because buying a house is already a very, very big financial commitment already. So
it's massive. Yeah, the government certainly take their slice with stamp duty. So certainly I would look for a fee-free broker if you're a first-home buyer. And if you get a good broker, they'll also be able to give you advice on properties and things like that, because they have experience in all of these areas. So, it's a good place to start.
Absolutely. Rob Stanton, thank you so much for helping us to understand some of the ins and outs of the mortgage world. And we're looking forward to have you again with us another time here on the show.
Thanks for being a part.